Greetings to you all and happy spooky season. Welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elite members, thank you so much for your dedication and love that you are showing the channel and myself. The feelings are reciprocated. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Crime and the Unsolved. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first case, there will be an ad, and after that, there will be no more ads within this video. Oh, word of caution. These cases contain gruesome details, violent situations, and cases that deal with children. So, if you are sensitive to this matter, this video is not for you. From here, listener discretion is highly advised. And before we dive in, I would like to send my condolences out to the families and friends that were affected by these cases. Let's get started, shall we? The end of a serial killer, Neil Falls. In 2015, a woman in Charleston, West Virginia, shot dead a man who tried to kill her. She was unaware of it at the time, but he was a suspected serial killer. At approximately 3:30 p.m. on July 18, 2015, a resident of the 800 block of 6th Street in Charleston, West Virginia, was startled by the sound of a woman screaming, emanating from the alleyway behind her home. Prompted by concern, she ventured out to investigate, discovering Heather Saul in a state of agitation, pacing anxiously. Heather told the woman that she had been attacked by a man who tried to rape her, whom she subsequently shot and killed in defense. The resident immediately dialed 911, relaying Heather's distressing account to the operator. She described Heather's visibly injured state, noting the presence of cuts. Responding to the call, officers were dispatched to the scene, where they found Heather still outside, visibly shaken. Heather disclosed that she worked as a sex worker and had advertised her services on the online platform Backpage. She recounted receiving a message from a man identified as Neil Falls, who had solicited her services, leading to the altercation. Alone at home, Heather found herself face-to-face with Falls as he arrived at her doorstep. Without hesitation, he pressed a gun against her abdomen, uttering the chilling ultimatum: live or die. Drawing on her lifetime of resilience, Heather recounted her instinctual response. I fought men my whole life. I guess I had to be ready for that guy. What followed was a frantic struggle for survival, spanning 10 to 15 minutes. Heather pleaded for her life as Falls told her, "No, you're going to be quiet," as he tightened his grip around her throat. I was telling him, please, just let me breathe, but he wouldn't, she recalled. She said that Falls told her that he was calling the shots. Falls dragged Heather around the house with his hands gripped tightly around her throat. I don't know where he was wanting to take me, but he was wanting to take me somewhere, she recollected. As Falls dragged Heather into the kitchen, their struggle intensified. It culminated with a moment of opportunity as Heather spotted a rake within reach. She managed to grab it, prompting Falls to momentarily lower his guard to try and take control of the makeshift weapon. Heather said, I grabbed the gun and just shot it behind me. It hit him. Heather was stunned. She told police she didn't actually believe it was loaded since Falls hadn't shot her. Reflecting on the encounter, Heather said, you could tell he was confident with what he was doing and saying. He had done it before. You could tell. Falls was pronounced dead at the scene, and it was decided that Heather wouldn't be charged with any crime as it was a clear case of self-defense. However, the shooting would result in an investigation, but that investigation would be into Neil Falls. Following the fatal confrontation with Falls, detectives made a chilling revelation. They suspected him to be a serial killer. When his vehicle was searched, they had come across a trove of unsettling items, including multiple axes, a shovel, bleach, a bulletproof vest, handcuffs, knives, a machete, heightening suspicions of his nefarious activities. Moreover, tucked away in Falls's pocket was another damning piece of evidence, a post-it note bearing the names, ages, and phone numbers of 6 sex workers who had advertised their services on the same platform as Heather. In an effort to track down some leads, detectives released photographs of the items, along with Falls's name and his photograph. In response to the escalating gravity of the case, Charleston detectives enlisted the support of the FBI, recognizing the necessity of a concerted effort to disseminate crucial information nationwide. Lieutenant Steve Cooper affirmed the collaboration, stating, "They are assisting us in submitting this case into a national database that goes to most law enforcement agencies without the country in order to share the details of what happened here." Simultaneously, a thorough examination of Falls's background commenced, with detectives delving into his past in search of potential links to unsolved crimes. Born on September 24, 1969, in Eugene, Oregon, Falls was the youngest of 10 siblings, growing up amidst poverty and familial turmoil, exasperated by an abusive father prone to violence against his mother. Following his formative years, Falls relocated to Greensburg, Kansas, where he resided with his father until the latter's passing in 1995. Following his stint in Kansas, Falls returned to his native Oregon, where he secured employment as a private security guard. Subsequently, he relocated to Hendersonville, Nevada in 2000, assuming a position as a security guard at Hoover Dam. However, results from acquaintances suggested a disturbing shift in his demeanor, marked by increasingly aberrant behavior, including reports of animal abuse in the desert expanses of Arizona. During this period, Falls also developed a penchant for soliciting the services of sex workers, a habit that extended to international destinations, such as the Philippines, where he engaged in sex tourism. These concerning behaviors culminated in 2008, when Falls faced allegations of sexual harassment, resulting in his departure from his job. Subsequently, Falls adopted a transient lifestyle, traversing various states including Oregon, Indiana, Kentucky, and Texas. Descriptions from individuals who encountered him during this time depict him as odd and creepy. In January 2015, he experienced emotional turmoil following revelations about his marital status of a woman he was involved with, compounded by the loss of his mother. During the investigation, the FBI identified Falls as a suspect in a string of murders targeting sex workers along the Las Vegas Strip, spanning from 2003 to 2007. Significantly, Falls lived in the nearby locale of Henderson during the period of the killings, coinciding with his employment at Hoover Dam. Moreover, suspicions arose regarding his potential involvement in a series of unsolved homicides and disappearances of women in the vicinity of Chillicothe, Ohio, where he had been residing at the time of his death. 6 women had vanished and 4 had been found dead in creeks. After Falls was killed, the disappearances abruptly stopped. Among the potential victims of Falls are Misty Marie Sands, a sex worker, disappeared from Las Vegas on March 12, 2003. Her torso was found wrapped in black plastic bags and cloth near State Route 159, close to State Route 160. She was identified by distinctive tattoos, a hummingbird, and an M design. Jody Brewer, a sex worker, went missing from Las Vegas in August of 2003. Her body was found wrapped in plastic near Interstate 15 in San Bernardino County, California, later that same month. Lindsay Harris, a sex worker, disappeared from Las Vegas on May 4, 2005. Her rental car was found abandoned in the South Las Vegas Valley. Approximately 3 weeks later, detectives discovered only her legs in a grassy field off Interstate 55 near Springfield, Illinois. It wasn't until 3 years later that DNA tested confirmed the identity of the legs as belonging to Lindsay. Megan Nicole Lancaster, a sex worker, disappeared from Wheelersburg, Ohio on April 3, 2013. She was expected to return to her parents' home after running errands that night but never made it. 2 days later, her car was discovered abandoned at a fast food restaurant. Holly Renee Logan, a sex worker who vanished in Columbus, Ohio on July 21, 2013. She wasn't reported missing until December of 2014. Her friend, Jamie Bowen, had vanished from the same area around 6 months earlier. Charlotte Eliza Trago, a sex worker who vanished in Chillicothe, Ohio, on May 3, 2014. She had told her mother that she was going on a date, but she was never seen again. She had recently asked her mother to help her get into rehab. Tamika Lynch, a friend of Charlotte and fellow sex worker, who vanished on May 20th of 2014. 3 weeks later, her semi-nude body was discovered in Paint Creek. She had died from an overdose, but her family believed that she was murdered. Wanda Jean Lemons, a sex worker who vanished in Chillicothe, Ohio, on November 4, 2014. According to a friend, they had heard she went to Texas with an African-American truck driver. According to her family, it was uncharacteristic of her to not call or visit. Shasta Himmelrich was pregnant the last time her family saw her in Chillicothe, Ohio, on Christmas Day of 2014. Her body was found in a river a week later. She had drowned and her death was ruled a suicide. Her friends and family refused this, saying she was a happy woman, especially about being newly pregnant. Tiffany Sayer, a sex worker who vanished in Chillicothe, Ohio, on May 11, 2015. Her body was found wrapped up in a tarp and discarded in a culvert off Cave Road near the Ross and Highland County line. The breadth of Falls' travel, as evidenced by his numerous traffic violations in 16 states, suggests the chilling possibility that his potential victims could span across the nation. Despite being a prime suspect in a multitude of murders, the absence of concrete physical evidence has hindered efforts to definitively link him to crimes. In 2018, Falls came under scrutiny in connection with the I-70 murders, a series of killings that plagued the Midwestern United States in 1992. His residency in Kansas at the time of the murders, where one of the murders occurred, coupled with eyewitness accounts strikingly similar to his appearance, cast suspicion upon him. However, the lack of physical evidence thwarted attempts to establish a definitive connection between Falls and the string of homicides. The Halloween solicitation murder of Billy Lee Black. On Halloween of 2008, the body of 47-year-old Billy Lee Black was found stabbed to death in Hagerstown, Maryland. Investigation would reveal disturbing claims of abuse, but were these nothing more than fiction? It was Halloween morning of 2008 in Hagerstown, Maryland. man living on James Street in Hagerstown, West End, was just about to leave in his car for work when he observed the lifeless body of a male on the ground. As he approached the body, he observed that it was surrounded in a puddle of blood. The man was evidently deceased, having been stabbed multiple times. He was identified as 47-year-old Billy Lee Black, who lived just a stone's throw away where his body was found. It wasn't until November that there was finally an arrest in the case. 19-year-old Alec Scott Egger of Burner Avenue. He was charged with first-degree murder and felony murder. Egger was a friend of Black's 15-year-old daughter, Danielle Black. In the weeks leading up to Billy's murder, Danielle had gone to Egger and told him that she was being abused by her father, Billy. Egger towered over most of the people in the community, and he was always carrying a knife, which made him the go-to guy when people wanted protection. He and Danielle were among a group of teenagers that were described as a collection of outcasts and malcontents. Danielle's claims of abuse struck Egger hard. He had a very tumultuous upbringing that was marred by abuse. At around 5:30 a.m. on Halloween morning, Billy was leaving his home to go to work. Egger was lying in wait. As soon as Billy came outside, he was verbally ambushed by Egger, who accused him of sexually abusing his daughter. Billy denied the accusations vehemently, and Egger responded by stabbing him to death. He was stabbed multiple times in the head and neck. One stab wound was so vicious that it almost severed Billy's spinal cord. Egger then dragged Billy's body to a spot near his truck. He then stole his wallet to give the impression that the murder was a robbery gone wrong before fleeing the scene, leaving Billy to be found by a passerby. In December, Danielle was arrested and charged as a juvenile with solicitation of first-degree murder in connection with her father's murder. Investigation had uncovered. Before approaching Egger, Danielle had approached another juvenile on the school bus with the same story she had provided Egger, that her father was abusing her and she wanted somebody to kill him. This juvenile, Matthew Gray, turned down the offer, and Danielle responded by saying she would get Egger to do it instead. Danielle was subsequently charged as an adult, dropping the juvenile charge. Conviction on solicitation of first-degree murder carried a maximum penalty of life in prison. Danielle was ordered to be held without bond. Following Danielle's arrest, her stepmother had come across journal entries in her bedroom. One poem was seemingly to her father, which read, quote, "You said you would never do it again. This is good news for you. I can finally call off my people, so you don't have to die. Just understand, if you do it again, you won't have a life to live. Your days would be numbered. Your ass would be gone." End quote. In other pages, Danielle had threatened another unknown person. She wrote, quote, "I'll use my magic to hurt you," and claimed that she was a Wiccan. She ended the journal by writing, "I'm afraid to go to jail." Some other pages included dark poems that Danielle had written, including one where she wrote about pain running through my veins. Danielle had been suffering from depression for quite some time. Back in February of 2008, she had taken 20 60 milligrams Cymbalta tablets, as well as a 20 milligram Phenergan tablet. She was discharged from hospital the following day with a recommendation that she receive outpatient counseling. Following her arrest, she was diagnosed with adjustment disorder and had underwent clinical therapy sessions. The sessions focused on her developing coping skills and strategies to cope with anxiety and depressive symptoms, as well as grief related to the loss of her father. Danielle would subsequently attempt to have her case referred to juvenile court. Her request was denied and the judge ordered her to be charged as an adult. During the court hearing, defense attorney Mary Draba said that Danielle was suffering from undiagnosed mental problems. She said, "We have a very disturbed, troubled, untreated young lady who fell prey to peers who filled her mind with undesirable thoughts." Meanwhile, Egger's defense team would request a psychiatric evaluation before he proceeded to trial. Since his incarceration, Egger had exhibited active symptoms of psychosis, as well as depression and possible seizure disorder. Danielle stood trial for the solicitation of her father's murder in July of 2009. This charge was in relation to Danielle attempting to get Matthew to kill her father before the murder was carried out by Egger. Danielle's defense team argued that there wasn't enough evidence against her client, even though multiple people had heard the conversation. The jury heard from several of Danielle's school friends. Ashley Schmid told the courtroom how Danielle had told her that her father often beat her. On one occasion, she showed her a large bruise on her thigh. During a 10-minute conversation, Danielle told Ashley she was going to ask a friend to kill her father. She even went into great detail about the plan, telling Ashley that she would distract her mother at 5:55 p.m. and then go outside to find her father dead. Ashley said to the jury she was so concerned about this conversation that she told her parents, and then she called the Black home shortly thereafter. Billy answered the phone, so she assumed Ashley must not have gone through with the threat. Ashley didn't think much of the threat again, at least not until Billy was found stabbed to death. Sean Stanton would also tell the jury that Danielle told him she was being abused by her father. He said that almost daily, Danielle said she wished her father wasn't alive. Another friend, Samantha Holliday, told the courtroom he beat her. She wanted him dead. Matthew Gray, the teenager Danielle had first approached about the murder, testified next in exchange for immunity. She said that around a month before the murder, Danielle asked him on the bus if he would take care of her father. He said he didn't think she was serious and jokingly replied, "What do I get out of it?" During the trial, Billy's wife, Andrea Black, testified against her stepdaughter. She stated, "We were a family of 5 years, and I loved her." She told the jury that Billy had not been abusing his daughter, telling them he felt guilty for grounding her. She said that Billy had tried to prevent his daughter from running around with the wrong crowd, stating he wouldn't let her go with friends when she wanted to. The jury deliberated for around an hour and a half before finding Danielle Black guilty of solicitation of murder. She was ordered to serve 10 years in prison. During the sentencing phase, Andrea provided a statement. She turned to Danielle and said, "Your dad never abused you." She said that Danielle only hated Billy because he wouldn't allow her to do whatever she wanted. She said that the night before Billy was killed, he hugged his daughter and told her that he loved her. Finally, it came out during the sentencing phase that Danielle had made the abuse up. In January of 2010, Egger took a plea bargain in which he admitted guilty to killing Billy, but not that the murder was premeditated. He acknowledged in an Alford plea that prosecutors had enough evidence for a first-degree conviction. He was sentenced to life in prison. Before leaving court to begin serving his sentence, he apologized to Andrea. "Taking your loved one causes me so much shame. This is never who I was or who I wanted to be." Outside of court, Andrea said, "He was a loving, kind, caring man. He was just trying to keep her away from people like that because he knew they were bad news." In 2011, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals overturned Danielle's conviction. They found that the judge erred in allowing evidence into the trial and also found that describing Billy's murder was prejudicial. The decision read in part, "The details of Billy Black's murder had little, if any, relevance to the question of whether Danielle solicited Gray to murder her father. We do not think it is possible to overemphasize that Danielle was never charged in connection with her father's murder, nor was Gray." Danielle Black subsequently pleaded guilty to solicitation of murder. She was ordered to serve a life sentence, with all but 6 years suspended. She was given credit for a little more than 3 years of time served and was ordered to be subject to 5 years of supervised probation upon her release. She has since been paroled. Ronnie Paris returned to his abusers. Ronnie Paris had been removed from his parents' care due to abuse. 2 years later, he was returned to their case, but 1 month later, he would be dead. Ronnie Antonio Paris was born in Tampa, Florida on the 9th of December 2001 to Nyshira and Ronnie Paris Sr. 2 months after his birth, somebody reported to the state's abuse hotline that his mother was not seeking medical help for him despite the fact he had been vomiting for more than 24 hours. Ronnie was admitted to hospital, where staff said his vomiting was most likely caused by his mother overfeeding him. In April of 2002, Ronnie was vomiting again and was suffering from dehydration. Caseworkers removed Ronnie from his mother because of her failure to follow medical advice, which included failing to seek medical help and not giving him a recommended drink called Pedialyte. Ronnie was placed in the care of his grandparents, where his father, Ronnie Sr., was also living. Just the following month, Ronnie was back in the hospital because he had lost a substantial amount of weight. While in the hospital, doctors discovered that Ronnie had fractures in one arm and one leg that were around 3 weeks old. Ronnie was removed from his family by the Florida Department of Children and Family Services. As per the police report, the injuries were clearly non-accidental. Ronnie was sent to live with Faye Bing, his foster mother, and she welcomed him as part of the family. He was just like a brother to her 2 daughters, and she taught him to walk. She described Ronnie as a playful and happy child who always laughed. Nyshira and Ronnie Sr. were allowed to visit their son at his home. Nyshira reportedly followed him around the house while Ronnie Sr. sat on the couch paying him no attention. For the next 2 years, Ronnie remained with Faye, and she had expressed her desire to adopt him. However, on December 14th, Ronnie was returned to his parents after they completed parenting courses. The family lived in an apartment on Humphrey Street, and, according to neighbors, they often heard blazing rows. Tia Davenport, who lived in the apartment above them, recalled how she frequently heard shouting, fists banging on doors, and objects being thrown against walls. Faye continued to visit Ronnie, driving up from Bradenton. Each time, Ronnie cried in her arms, but he refused to talk. Concern started to surface for Faye, particularly when she noticed what looked like a burn mark on his forehead and a bruise on his cheek during a visit in early January. Additionally, she observed that Ronnie seemed to have lost weight. Following her visit, Faye promptly communicated her worries to Ronnie's caseworker. The caseworker arrived at the family's home and saw the bruises on Ronnie's face, a scratch and a possible burn on his cheeks and forehead. They also saw that he was repeatedly vomiting and regressed in his speech and toilet training. When the caseworker addressed the issue with Nyshira, she attributed Ronnie's injuries to a fall, an explanation that the caseworker ultimately accepted. On the 13th of January, Faye's sister, Tammy McAdams, joined her on her visit. She was taken aback by Ronnie's condition, commenting, He was nothing but head. All his weight was gone. During the visit, Ronnie appeared to be sick, and Faye was informed that he had been released from the hospital 3 days earlier for some kind of illness. Faye was allowed to take Ronnie out of the car for a little bit, and he vomited in her vehicle. Faye and her sister contemplated the idea of driving Ronnie back to Bradenton, but the fear of potential accusations of kidnapping from his parents loomed large. They grappled with the concern that the police might not believe that Ronnie was being abused by his parents. They were also wary that such an act might jeopardize Faye's custody of her other foster child. Ultimately, they chose to abandon the idea. On the 22nd of January 2005, Nishira and Ronnie Sr. were at a Bible study group that was held at the home of their friends. They brought Ronnie along with them and put him on the couch where he fell asleep. Sometime later, they noticed that Ronnie was unconscious, so they rushed him to the hospital. Upon his arrival, paramedics attempted CPR, but Ronnie remained in cardiac arrest. It was determined that Ronnie couldn't breathe on his own. He was placed on life support. 6 days later, Ronnie died. During his autopsy, it was uncovered that his cause of death was blunt force trauma to the back of the head. He has sustained 3 severe blows that resulted in internal bruising as well as trauma to the brain. According to the pathologist, the vomiting spells Ronnie had been experiencing were caused by the severe head trauma. Both Nishira and Ronnie Sr. were arrested, and Nishira disclosed some disturbing information. She said to detectives that after Ronnie was returned to their care, she saw Ronnie Sr. hit him several times on the back of the head. On one occasion, he threw Ronnie at her and punched his head multiple times while she was holding him. She said on another occasion, he slammed Ronnie against the wall. According to Nishira, it started with play fighting. She said that Ronnie Sr. smacked Ronnie 3 times on the back of the head. She said that she told him to stop, but he responded and said he didn't want his son to grow up soft. She described another time when she came out of the shower and found Ronnie crying after another beating. Ronnie Sr. then hit Ronnie several times in the back of the head and said that the baby jumped at him. Ronnie Sr.'s sister, Shanita Powell, confirmed Nishira's account, telling detectives that her brother was trying to teach him how to fight. She said that Ronnie was concerned his 3-year-old son might be gay. Even Sheldon Bostick, who was Ronnie's Bible study group, had witnessed the abuse too, but excused it as doing what fathers do, slapbox. He said that Ronnie always commented he didn't want his son growing up to be pushed around. He further added that Ronnie Sr. said he didn't want his son to be a sissy. On the 2nd of February, Nishira and Ronnie Sr. were charged in connection with Ronnie's death. His father was charged with felony murder and aggravated child abuse, while his mother was charged with child abuse neglect. In the wake of the charges, questions were raised regarding Ronnie's return to his biological parents. Andrew Ritter, a Department of Children and Family spokesman, said the agency was thoroughly reviewing the handling of the case. During that period, Hillsborough Kids Incorporated, the nonprofit organization responsible for managing foster care services under a contract with the State Department of Children and Families, was already under scrutiny. Merely a week prior, the agency's executive director had resigned abruptly, drawing attention to his handling of administrative and financial affairs. The agency had also been compelled to account for the death of another child under the care in Alabama, as well as the unfortunate incidents where a former foster child drowned in a Tampa swimming pool, preceded 2 years earlier by her sister's similar tragedy. In a preliminary review of Ronnie's case, the State Department of Children and Families criticized the caseworker who had accepted Nishira's explanation of Ronnie's injuries. They said, if the caseworker had recognized the warning signs, actions to protect this child could have prevented his death. The review also found that there were several other issues that had been missed. Ronnie's parents hadn't been given psychological evaluations, even though medical professionals had recommended one at least for Nishira. Moreover, Ronnie's parents never actually attended Positive Parenting, a recommended basic child rearing skills program. The review found that caseworkers had underestimated the risk that Ronnie was facing after he was removed from his foster mother and reunited with his parents. Despite the fact Ronnie came to foster care with serious injuries, Nishira and Ronnie Sr. were not sent for anger management or other services specifically designed for people who may be violent. The caseworker who had visited Ronnie after Faye reported her concerns. Linda Miller was suspended without pay, and her supervisor, Dorcas Walker, was suspended with pay. They had both worked at Northside Mental Health Center, which was partnered with Hillsborough Kids, in working with local foster children under the overall contract with DCF. According to the DCF review, Miller should have reported at least 2 of Ronnie's injuries to the state's abuse hotline. However, the review also noted that doctors who treated Ronnie for various reasons during his stay with his parents did not see signs of abuse. The review ultimately found that Miller's inability to recognize signs of abuse and neglect contributed to Ronnie's death. Ronnie Sr. was ordered to stand trial for the murder of his son, and the trial began in July of 2005. The prosecution portrayed Ronnie Sr. as a man who wanted more of his wife's attention, who complained about not having enough sex since the birth of Ronnie, and openly questioned whether Ronnie was actually his. The defense, on the other hand, tried to shift the blame to Nishira. They claimed that Nishira's account of what happened was nothing more than an attempt to save herself. He said she had given conflicting accounts of the abuse that was inflicted on Ronnie and questioned her decision to withhold the truth from detectives. Nishira testified for the prosecution and said that Ronnie Sr. had always been abusive toward their son. She said that she didn't say anything because she was afraid of getting into trouble. According to Nishira, she couldn't recall much about the 6 weeks she had spent with her son after he was allowed to return home, but she could remember Ronnie Sr. beating him to death. She testified, Ronnie came in the kitchen. He was upset, and he slammed the baby up against the wall. The next day, Ronnie was acting strangely. She described how they took him to a friend's house for a Bible study, and Ronnie spent most of the day asleep on the couch. They had just ordered pizza for dinner when she noticed that something was wrong with her son. She recollected. We was quoting scriptures and stuff, and I looked over at my baby and saw he wasn't breathing. John Hafner, a pediatrician, told the jury that when he examined Ronnie when he arrived at the hospital that day, he was taken aback by how skinny he was. Testing showed that Ronnie had sustained 2 serious head injuries before he fell unconscious. Hafner testified, I noted in my notes that the injury was suspicious. The evidence against Ronnie Sr. was overwhelming, and after just 3 hours of deliberation, he was found guilty of the second-degree murder of his son and aggravated child abuse. Outside of court, Ronnie Sr.'s father, also named Ronnie, commented, Oh man, I raised my son in the right way. We played football, went fishing, went to wrestling matches, boxing, all of that. He suggested that Naishira should have been the one who was to blame, not his son. His grandmother added, "Ronnie ain't never done anything bad, but you know how the devil is. He takes the good ones." In August of 2005, Ronnie Paris Sr. was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Before the sentence was handed down, he begged for leniency, telling the judge, "I loved my son dearly. I wished I could hold him here. I never did anything to hurt my baby or abuse my baby in any way." Naishira Paris was sentenced to 5 years probation for culpable negligence in the death of her son. Again, I'm going to speak up about that case I just read. That is absolute horseshit. I do not know why in situations like this, why caseworkers in different states always want to give the child back to their parents after they know what the parents are doing to their kids. And then this horseshit, while they're in court, they get handed down light sentences. Neither one of them got life sentences for this poor baby. This was a slap on the wrist. 30 years and then 5 years probation? Are you kidding me? Anyway, on to the next case. Caution, this next case is very gruesome and very disturbing. Listening discretion is highly advised. The Apartment of Horrors, Maria Nemeth. Police in Sunrise, Florida were responding to a report of a woman who was struggling to breathe. However, when they arrived, they were met by a horrific scene. Just after 3:30 a.m. on September 20th, 2015, the 911 dispatch center in Sunrise, Florida, received a frantic call from a man reporting that his girlfriend was having trouble breathing and was going to die. The caller, in a state of panic, shouted, "I don't know, man, she's not breathing. She's gonna die, man, come on, someone help her." Police and paramedics were immediately dispatched to the apartment on 128th Drive. Upon entering the dimly lit apartment, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Blood smeared the hallway walls and floor, accompanied by fragments of what appeared to be human tissue, creating a grim trail leading toward the bathroom. The officers followed the eerie sounds of wailing, growing louder as they approached. They observed that the bathroom door had been torn off its hinges. When they entered, they found 24-year-old Fidel Lopez, the caller, sprawled on the floor. He was clutching the lifeless, naked body of a woman. His tears mingled with the blood on the floor. She was identified as his 31-year-old girlfriend, Maria Nemeth. As the officers approached closer, the full horror became apparent. Maria was not just dead. Her intestines had been ripped out from her vagina. Lopez was immediately arrested at the scene, and as he was transported to the police station, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the apartment. In the bedroom, forensic experts found more evidence of violence in the form of blood and human tissue in the walk-in closet, walls, and doors. There was also several holes in the wall that appeared to be caused by a fist, as well as a shattered sliding glass door. In the kitchen, they came across a half-full bottle of tequila, 1800, and cut limes, as well as signs of a physical struggle. The couple had just moved into the apartment a week earlier, but it was evident that something had gone terribly wrong. When detectives spoke with neighbors, they said they heard a man yelling and loud noises that lasted about 2 hours. Lopez had previously lived in Opa-locka, where his neighbor, Ismary Soares, said of him, "He didn't know how to behave. He didn't make friends with anybody. Over at the police station, Lopez told detectives that he and Maria had been drinking tequila together in celebration of moving into their new apartment. He said at one point, they began having violent sex, and Maria had asked him to put a beer bottle and his fist inside her vagina. He said that he complied and that it had been her idea and that she enjoyed it. He said afterwards she went into the bathroom and vomited, and that he later found her in the bathroom struggling to breathe. However, Lopez's story didn't correlate with the evidence found at the crime scene. Maria had obviously been killed and mutilated. One of the detectives in the interrogation room said to him, "Fidel, this is not a case of rough sex. You have to do the right thing and tell the truth." Lopez eventually broke down and changed his story. He told detectives that he had become a monster when Maria twice said her ex's name as they were having sex in the closet. He said that after hearing another man's name, he became furious. "She called me the name of the other fucking guy," he said. "And she said it twice, and she was wrong, and she was confusing me with him. At that point, I get mad. I get really, really bad." He claimed he left Maria in the closet and then began smashing things around the apartment and punching the walls. What he said next horrified even the most seasoned detectives. According to Lopez, he returned to the closet where Maria was now unconscious after drinking too much alcohol. He said he shoved a beer bottle, a hair straightener, and both fists up her vagina and anus, adding that she was so intoxicated that she couldn't resist. Lopez disturbingly relayed that he then rammed his arm up to the elbow in her vagina and anus and ripped out parts of her intestines. He said that he then carried Maria into the bathroom and poured water on her face, but she never regained consciousness. After realizing that Maria was dead, Lopez said he then washed his hands in the bathroom before he went outside to call the police. It was at this moment that he began to panic. He attempted to clean up the apartment and then decided to finally call 911. After the confession, Lopez was charged with first-degree murder. During his brief court hearing, he said in Spanish, "I was drunk, intoxicated. My mind was not like that." Judge Stephen Zakor interrupted and warned Lopez not to speak about facts of the case before he turned his microphone off. As details of the murder spread across the media, people were horrified. Maria's cousin, Nellie Cortez, commented, "I still cannot. I can't process it. Maria was very responsible. It's very hard to understand why she got involved with a person who has these kinds of thoughts." She described her cousin as a beautiful young woman who was full of life and very close to her family. Maria was a native of Peru who had immigrated to Miami-Dade County as a teenager, where she quickly learned English. She had previously worked retail jobs and at medical offices, but at the time of her death, she was working as the leasing manager at the apartment complex where she and Lopez had lived for just a week. As for Lopez, he was born in Havana and came to the United States to join his father when he was a teenager. In October, Lopez returned to court where he pleaded not guilty to the first-degree murder of Maria. He was assigned a new defense attorney after his original one withdrew himself from the case. The judge then sentenced his trial for February of 2018. His defense attorney, Melissa McNeil, commented in the media, "We're ready for trial." In July, however, Fidel Lopez changed his plea and instead pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Maria Nemeth. During the sentencing phase, Maria's uncle read aloud a letter on behalf of the family. He said that only God would determine Lopez's fate. Lopez was given the opportunity to speak, and he begged Maria's family for forgiveness. He stated, Today, I am happy to fulfill this conviction. I know that what I did has to be paid, and I agree. I will pay with my life for the life I took. To Maria's family, I ask for forgiveness. As part of the plea agreement, Lopez couldn't be sentenced to death, and he thanked the judge for sparing him the death penalty. Judge Ilana Holmes then sentenced Lopez to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Grinder murder of Paul Jeffries. In February of 2016, Paul Jeffries was found dead in his home. He had been the victim of a brutal and frenzied attack. Shortly after his murder, a teenage boy appeared in hospital with injuries. He claimed they were self-inflicted. But was he really telling the truth? It was the 25th of February 2016 when the employer of 52-year-old HMRC and Treasury official Paul Jeffries asked police in Mayfield, High Weald of East Sussex, England, to conduct a welfare check. He had not shown up to work for a couple of days, and all attempts to contact him were going unanswered. Paul had worked at HMRC for around 20 years and had been instrumental in shaping government policy on tax and financial issues. He had previously lived in London, but much preferred the slow pace of life in Mayfield. Most days, Paul went to work, came home, and he rarely deviated from this. He was said to be somewhat reclusive, opting to spend more time alone than with others. Police arrived at the Grade 2 listed cottage that Paul owned in Coggins Mill Lane. Inside, they were met with a scene of unspeakable horror. The kitchen was splattered with blood, and Paul's body was found on the floor. He had a tea towel concealing his face. He had suffered over 40 injuries, which included stab wounds and abrasions caused by heavy objects, including a candlestick. He had a slashed throat and a partially severed thumb. The attack was sustained and spanned several rooms in the home, including the bedroom and lounge. There was broken glass found in Paul's bed and a large horizontal cut on a pillowcase. There was blood found on 4 knives from a kitchen knife block, the handle of a knife sharpening steel, and a marble rolling pin. The following month, there was a breakthrough in the case when police arrested 17-year-old Ben Bamford and charged him with the murder of Paul. An investigation would uncover that Bamford and Paul had met a couple of times previously after meeting on the dating app Grindr back in 2014, when Bamford was just 15 years of age. The two lost contact and then met once more through Grindr back in December of 2015. Paul and Bamford had made plans to meet up, but, unbeknownst to Paul, Bamford had been abusing drugs and had received text messages from his drug dealer, whom he owed money to. In total, Bamford owed him around £400. On the day of the murder, Bamford had received a text message from his drug dealer, Glenn, which read, "I'm not happy. On my boy's life, I will see you today." In another, Glenn accused Bamford of treating me like a mug. Bamford responded, "I will get it to you. Don't worry." An examination of Bamford's mobile phone uncovered that between 9:34 p.m. and 10:57 p.m., Bamford was connected to Paul's Wi-Fi. During the savage attack on Paul, Bamford had sustained an injury and then fled from Paul's home in his gray Audi TT. Paul's neighbor had reported hearing the wheels of the car spinning on gravel as Bamford made his quick getaway. Afterwards, Bamford and his friends went to hospital for the injuries sustained during Paul's murder. While there, his friends snapped photographs of him smirking. He had blood on his face, hands, and arms, and he was giving the middle finger. He told the hospital staff that he had caused the injuries himself while self-harming. Then, on the 27th of February, his mother took him to the Eastbourne police station, where he claimed that he had been involved in a fight in Mayfield. During an argument at home about the cause of his injuries, Bamford had exclaimed, "I think the man is dead. I stabbed him." At the police station, he confessed to killing Paul but denied that he had murdered him. Van Bamford stood trial later that year. During opening statements, prosecutor Jeremy Carter Manning said, "There is no dispute who killed Mr. Jeffries. Your focus will be on what was in the defendant's mind at this time these events happened." The defense, on the other hand, would be putting forward the suggestion that the murder was self-defense. Bamford was claiming that Paul had forced himself on him and that he acted in self-defense. He stated, "He did things to me, so I stabbed him." Bamford said that they had gone to the bedroom and had sex, but when he told Paul to stop, he didn't. He carried on until Bamford said he needed the toilet. According to Bamford, he went downstairs to get away but found that the door had been locked. He went back upstairs to get his clothes and his phone, but before doing so, he said that he had grabbed a knife from the kitchen. He then said he went upstairs and a fight ensued. He denied that he had planned on killing Paul and did not think to call 999. Bamford said that he had gone to Paul's home that day in the hopes that he would just give him money, which he had done so in the past. According to the prosecution, however, he had gone over with the intention of killing Paul and then robbing him. Detective Chief Inspector Tanya Jones stating, "This was a horrific act by a teenage boy who preyed on his victim with the aim of exploiting him for money. The level of violence he inflicted on Paul Jeffries was extreme, and then he fled the scene in the victim's car. He showed no remorse, smirking for a selfie photo just hours later." Ben Bamford would be found guilty of the murder of Paul Jeffries in November of 2016. He would be sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 16 years. The Grim Discoveries in the Garage, Megan Huntsman. Darren West had just been released after serving a 9-year prison sentence. On the 12th of April, 2014, he was clearing out the home he had previously lived in with his wife and children. In the garage, he came across a box wrapped up in duct tape. What he found would horrify him for the rest of his life. Police arrived at the home of 5330 East 2000 North. When they pulled up outside the single-family home, they observed that the garage door was open. It appeared as though the family had been spring cleaning, with items strewn about the garage and boxes scattered on the floor. Darren was in a state of hysteria, sitting outside the home. He told the responding officers he had just been released from prison on drug manufacturing charges. He was in the process of moving back into the home that was owned by his parents, and his 3 daughters, ages 13, 18, and 20, were still living there. Before he had gone to prison, he had lived there with his wife, Megan Huntsman, but they had since broken up, and she had moved out of the home and was living with her new boyfriend in a trailer in Salt Lake City. When he arrived at the home that morning, he and his parents tackled the garage. It had been cluttered with piles of boxes upon piles of boxes. While clearing out a section of the garage, Darren noticed a box tightly wrapped in duct tape. Curiosity piqued. He opened the box to find a white trash bag inside, which appeared to contain something. Carefully, he unwrapped the first bag, only to find another bag within it, also wrapped in duct tape. With growing unease, Darren ripped off the tape and opened the second plastic bag. A foul odor immediately hit him, causing him to scrunch up, his face in disgust. One of the neighbors had complained about a horrible smell coming from the garage just a few weeks earlier. To the neighbor, it smelled like the mounted deer head in the garage had gone rancid. But Darren would soon learn that it was something much more gruesome that had gone off. Peering inside the plastic bag, he was horrified to discover the lifeless body of a fully decomposed baby. Darren led police to the grisly discovery, and they found a full-term, fully decomposed baby. They obtained a search warrant for the rest of the garage, unsure of what they were going to find. As they searched, Darren called his ex-wife, Huntsman, to try and find out more. After he confronted her, she broke down into tears and told him that the baby was his, and she gave birth when he was in prison. However, she said that the baby was stillborn. After the discovery of the baby, Megan Huntsman was picked up by police and taken to the interrogation room by Detective Dan Beckstorm. She was visibly upset, and she said that the baby had been born after Darren went to prison. She said it was stillbirth and that she had kept the entire pregnancy secret. While the detective spoke with Huntsman, the search of the family home continued. While searching the cluttered garage, detectives came across another cardboard box in the same condition as the one that had contained the first baby. It was sealed with duct tape. On the side, a label read, "Baby Stuff, CCC, Megan's." When they opened it, they found heavy packaging and something wrapped in a plastic bag. As they lifted the bag out, a grim stench overwhelmed them. A liquid was seeping through the bottom of the bag. Carefully, they opened it and were horrified to discover the remains of a second baby. Much like the first one, it appeared to be a full-term baby. Over in the interrogation room, Huntsman was confronted about the discovery of the second baby. The detective wasn't prepared for her response. She replied that the detectives were going to find more dead babies in the garage, and she wasn't sure exactly how many. She maintained that they were all stillborn, and that they were all Darren's, and she had kept the pregnancies hidden. By now, it was painfully clear to detectives that this case was much more complex than initially believed. It wasn't incomprehensible for a woman to conceal one pregnancy and then have a stillborn, but for that to happen 4 times, it seemed very unplausible. Detective Beckstorm began to consider it very likely that something much more nefarious had happened, that Huntsman had hidden her pregnancies and then killed the babies after they were born. The interrogation pressed on, and Huntsman told the detective that one of the babies she had given birth to in the bathtub had actually been born alive. She said that her heart beat for a little while before it stopped. The detective was stunned. He thought that if Huntsman had have wanted the baby, she would have immediately called for help the moment she realized something was wrong. The detective was more than suspicious, and he pressed Huntsman for more information. She broke down and admitted that she had given birth to 3 babies and then strangled them. Back at the home, the detectives found the third body. They were packaged up in a box, much more secure than the other 2, with layers upon layers of duct tape. Once they opened it up, there was a plastic bag, but it was wrapped up in vinyl. When they opened that up, they found a baby's body wrapped in a plastic bag and towel. The search continued, and in another cupboard box, detectives found a 4th body. They were found under 2 blankets and 2 bath towels in the bottom left corner of a cubby. But the grim findings don't end there. Detectives uncovered a 5th, 6th, and 7th baby in the garage. Megan Huntsman was arrested and charged with 6 counts of murder. She had admitted to killing 6 of the babies, but maintained one of them was stillborn. All of the fingerprints on the boxes that contained the babies came back as a match to Huntsman, while an examination of the remains revealed that Darren was the father of them all. Since the bodies were so decomposed, a cause of death couldn't be determined, but it was determined that 5 of the babies were girls and 2 were boys. The news of the murders stunned the community of Pleasant Grove. It's a small town with just 1 tavern and more than a dozen churches. Not the expected scene for such a horrific crime. The mayor, Mike Daniels, referred to the town as suburban America, if not smaller. Reporters flocked to the neighborhood to get some comments from the family's neighbors. They all said that the family mostly kept to themselves and just seemed like your average family. Huntsman appeared to be quiet, and some said that while they tried to be friendly to her, she didn't seem to want to reciprocate. Some said that they noticed Huntsman's weight fluctuating over the years, with her switching between baggy and tight-fitting clothing. But still, none of them ever realized that she was hiding a pregnancy. One of the neighbors, Sandy Wall, questioned why Megan killed the 7 babies, especially considering her youngest daughter was born during the same decades as the murders. According to Huntsman, at the time of the pregnancies, she had been addicted to methamphetamine and other drugs. She said to detectives that she didn't want to deal with the responsibility of having more children. She had continued to abuse drugs throughout the pregnancies and possibly believed that her actions would result in miscarriages. But clearly that wasn't the case. Police Captain Mike Roberts commented, "It was completely selfish. She was high on drugs and didn't want the babies or the responsibility. That was her priority at the time." He said that Huntsman had told him that she needed money to fund her drug addiction, and the babies would take away from that money. Megan Huntsman ultimately pleaded guilty to 6 counts of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 49 years. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true crimes and the Unsolved. I'd like to take a moment and thank the rest of the members of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your continued dedication. As I always say, without you, I don't have a voice, and I would be sitting here in the studio talking to no one but myself. I appreciate each and every last one of you. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. In the meantime, please stay vigilant and take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.